So we're joined by a man who had two majorly successful seasons at Farnborough Town, a massively successful career elsewhere, over 590 appearances, over 320 goals. We're joined by David Leworthy. Hello, David.
Hi, Ben. How are you doing?
Firstly, where are you? What are you up to these days?
I'm living in Portsmouth, right near the seafront. Lovely little flat down there, which is good. I'm working at a private school in Farnborough as a site manager.
So a big departure from football then?
Yes, it was, yeah. I was involved in it up until probably about 5 years ago when I decided that I'll go and watch my grandchildren play football, pull myself away from it. I didn't start to enjoy it then, and that was the one time I said I would pull away from it. So I did. I played a long, long time, which I'm suffering for now. But I go and watch a lot of games.
So your career then, as we just mentioned, over 590 appearances, over 320 goals, prolific for Farnborough Town in the 2 seasons you were there. But before we get on to your time at Farnborough, talk us through your career to that point and how you joined Farnborough.
Well, I think everybody knows, looking at the stats and stuff, obviously I started at Portsmouth as a kid, went into non-league from there after only 20 minutes of my only appearance for Portsmouth as a sub. Had to drop into non-league with Farnborough Town for 2 seasons and got picked up whilst playing there for Spurs, which was an unbelievable jump. And then the career kicked off again. Yeah, and basically on the professional front with Spurs, Oxford, Reading, loan at Shrewsbury, and then back to Reading, where, things didn't quite work out for me. I was mainly a squad player during my professional career, coming on nicking the goals here and there. Would have liked to have played a lot more regularly. But it wasn't to be. And at the age of 30, I decided to drop out from Reading into the conference with Farnborough. After talking to Ted Pearce, bless him, I could see the club had, good potential and decided to drop out into non-league, which, wasn't a major catastrophe as some people might have thought it might have been. But for me, that was the start of what I thought was a really great and enjoyable career in non-league.
How did Ted Pearce convince you to come to Farnborough?
Well, I was keeping an eye on things in the non-league football. I always have done ever since I left Pompey and I went to Fareham. Got a lot of friends who played in non-league football, so just kept an eye on it all the time. And Farnborough was one of the clubs, and obviously with their FA Cup exploits at the time, after taking West Ham to the replay, Ted had contacted me and asked what was going on, and I did say that I was thinking of moving on. And he just said, we're earning a bit of money from the West Ham Cup run, and I want to build a team ready for next season. And I liked what I saw, and I spoke to Andy Bye, who obviously I was a friend of at Farnborough Town all them years before, and convinced me to go. And that was it. And I just wanted to go and play football where I was wanted and just go and enjoy myself, because my dad always said, always go and play for a club that want you. And that's what they showed, the keenness, and I was keen to go.
What were your first impressions of the club and the team that you came into?
The club was great. I mean, everyone was so friendly, which I found all throughout my career in non-league. But, my first club outside the professional football, other than obviously at Fareham, they were a great bunch of lads, great director at the time, chairman, all the way through to Ted Pearce and Alan Taylor, through to the kitman. Just everybody at the club involved was so friendly, and it was a great atmosphere to be involved in, and to add some great players at the club as well.
Who especially do you mean by that?
The great players where you can go back. I mean, I know nearly the whole team who was there when I signed, but, obviously you had Simon Reed, who was banging in goals for fun, Jamie Horton, who could create a chance out of nothing. You had Brian Broom, obviously, who played hundreds and hundreds of games, Stevie Baker, Jim Wigmore, I said Andy Bye, John Power. You go through the team, Keith Baker, with the likes of even Matty Holland, who came down on loan as well, who ended up having a great career. Dean Coney's as well. I mean, we had such a great team, and we finished in a respectable position in that first season I was there.
Can you remember though who you made your debut against?
Yes, I can. Do you know what? I was actually trying to think of my first goal, but I do remember the debut. I'm sure it was away to Runcorn, and it was a draw.
But you didn't score in the first game?
No. I actually challenged the keeper, and the ball fell kindly for Reedy, who tapped it into an empty net.
But over the following 2 seasons, you scored 64 goals in 71 games. Those numbers are incredible.
I know. It's obviously, looking back, it was my best, career as goals, and that second season. was just phenomenal. The way we played attacking football, and we just created chances, and the players got on the same wavelength and knew what I wanted, and especially Jamie Horton. We just had an understanding, like I had at the other clubs I went to as well, with certain players who just knew where you were going to be. And then, even though I was 30 and coming out of professional football, it was not too late to still learn things about the game. And I just, learnt a lot from bringing into non-league football from the pro game, which helped me, and just kept training and training. I stayed behind for a long, long time after training, doing my own finishing sometimes, where the boys were coming out in the tunnel shouting me, they want to go home. They've got to get up at 6 a.m. So, yeah, it was great. And it was, we did create loads of chances. Well, I think even that season we finished the second highest scorers to Wycombe Wanderers, who were, beating everybody that year. So that was quite an achievement in itself.
So of those 64 goals, how many can you remember?
Oh, now I'm struggling now. It's a long time ago. It's a long one game that does stand out for me was the hat-trick up at Kidderminster. It was a really quick hat-trick, and there were virtually three of the goals were identical. It was just so weird how they fell for it. The usual ball from Jamie over the top, in behind, keeper comes out, a lob over the top of him. That one sticks in the mind. There was a few other games at home. I think there was a Macclesfield game when I scored 4. That happened on a couple of occasions. There was a few games where, I think it was a quarter-final away at Witton Albion. I was really hoping that we were going to have a good old run in the FA Trophy, which was something I was lucky to achieve later on in my career. But it wasn't to be there. We were so close on so many occasions, but it just wasn't to be. But there were some great memories of that. Great goals.
The second season, you scored 32 league goals, 39 in all competitions, yet Farnborough were relegated.
Yeah, it was really strange. I just couldn't believe that. It was... thinking about that, I've spoken to a lot of people over the years about that, and one of the things that disrupted our play, we were always going back to the keeper and frustrating teams. And that was the year, if you remember, that the keepers couldn't pick it up. And we used to go back to whether it be John, how was it? Yeah. And then obviously Mike Taylor later on, who ended up being a professional as well. And we just to frustrate teams, go back to him, he'd pick it up and take our time. And then all of a sudden they just run in and away we go. And they changed it that season. I think we suffered for that. Obviously the keepers had to prep now. They had to join in 5-a-sides in training to get their touch. And it affected us massively, I think. But yeah, when you think that we were, I don't know, second or third highest scorers in the league, but one of the worst against, you could see where we struggled a little bit, but still managed to get forward and just score, an incredible amount of goals. And just looking back, I still find it really weird how we went down. Incredible, really.
I'm not sure there's ever been a top goal scorer of a league who's also been relegated.
Do you know what? Someone pulled me on that the other day, and there's been a few players obviously at a higher level than me, 21, 22s, 24s, but 32 for me was, in itself was a great achievement for the club. But when I look back now, yeah, people have been saying, Dave, you probably could be the highest goal scorer ever to a team to get relegated. It was so strange.
What was your favourite goal you scored for Farnborough?
I can remember it was a home game. I'm not sure against a team where I turned a fellow on the box. I'll tell you what it was like. If you ever remember Glenn Hoddle's goal for Spurs at Watford, it was similar to that, very similar to that. I've done that on quite a few occasions to catch the keeper out, because obviously getting 30, 31, 32, I wasn't the quickest at that time. So basically, I trained myself to be quick of thought. A lot of the time when you receive the ball as a striker, even if you watch it on the TV now, you always see the keeper off the line. But obviously we can see it watching on the TV, where on the pitch sometimes it's more difficult. But I would train myself and did it a lot in training, where I'd ask the keepers just to stand around the penalty spot, where one of the lads knock it to me about 25, 30 yards out and turn and just keep chipping it. A lot of the time it ended up in the street, but most of the time in the game, lucky enough, it ended up in the net. So it was good.
When you were at Farnborough Town, you played with Simon Reed and Dean Coney. Different players. Who did you prefer playing with?
Yeah, all three of us, all slightly different players. I mean, Reedy was great to play up front with. He was very hard working, as well as his goals. He contributed massively to the team. So he was great to play up front with. Dean himself was great because he was a target man and you could play off him. But eventually, obviously, if you remember, I think Dean ended up playing centre-half. He went back, so it ended up being probably Reedy I played up alongside more than ever, to be honest. It's really difficult to choose between the two because, like you say, different styles, but both great players.
So then after 2 seasons, As we mentioned, Farnborough were relegated and you moved on to Dover. But the goals didn't stop there either. 86 goals in 152 appearances.
Yeah, not as phenomenal as Farnborough as that, but they I kept working hard because you got to look after yourself as the years are coming on in your 30s. And as any good striker would tell you, the goal never moves. It always stays where it is. So you've just got to keep, your intelligence going and getting in the right positions, and they will still come. I think you'll ask quite a lot of strikers. They do have one of them seasons where it does go in phenomenally. I remember Clive Allen at Spurs with 51 goals, I think it was one season. There's quite a few strikers who've done that. But they seem to sort of tick over quite nicely for me.
So then the career went from Dover to Rushden, Kingstonian, Havant and Waterlooville, nice and local.
Yes.
Was that your last club, Havant and Waterlooville?
Yeah, playing wise, yeah, that's standard, yes.
Was it just age? Was that what caused you to retire?
Yeah, it was catching up with me a little bit. I think the last, I would say, proper competitive game at that level was the Dr. Martens Premier game, I think, I was 44. So, yeah, and I ended up playing local teams in London, helping my friends out, coaching and stuff. I went back to Kingstonian. I think I even played for them a little bit older as well, it was a mistake in the end, obviously. I mean, I can't run now. I can just about walk at the moment. But you just have to try and look after your body. And I think I did quite well for me to play on that standard, really. And, lucky for me, at that time, my health was okay. And the goals were still going in every now and then as well, which was great.
You did a little bit of managing.
Yes.
What happened with the management? Was it something you didn't take to? Because not everybody does, obviously.
No, I fell into them ones. At Dover, I ended up being player manager twice, which isn't really good because you're trying to focus on two things at once. It's not the best thing to do. Obviously, I've done it at Havant and Waterlooville as well, and I ended up being manager there. And things they went okay. The season I was there, we were in the bottom four, and we had to finish in the top 12 because that was when they done the cup for the National League North and South. So we went on a good run, and I managed to get us in the top 12, which was good. And then I had a bit of an illness and a few personal things which were probably affecting me at the time. So the club basically sort of asked me to step down, which was probably a good move at the time because my health wasn't too good at the time as well. So, yeah, I sort of stepped away from it a little bit and went back later on when I was well enough to just be in the coaching role, really. Just
back to the playing career then. You've played with some absolute star names. You shared a pitch with Glenn Hoddle.
Yes. Yeah, great player, great person. When you can think, you're walking into the training ground after spending 2 seasons at Farnborough Town, and then the next minute you're walking on the training ground with the lads that you've just watched on Match of the Day on the Saturday. It was quite surreal, really, and they were great. They were fantastic when I went there. They took me under their wing. I had people like Graham Roberts and Tony Galvin who also come from non-league, who I spoke to quite regularly. And I didn't get overawed by it all. That's what the lads actually said to me. Just don't get overawed about who you're playing with. You've come here because Spurs want you as a player. So just be a player. And that's what I did. So lucky enough, I sort of slotted in. But, what Glenn could do with the ball was quite phenomenal. And also, there's the quality of players that you had back in the 80s then in that Spurs team as well as the other leagues was just a dream for me to be involved in that, to be honest.
Was Ozzy Ardiles there when you were there then?
Ozzy Ardiles were there, so small but so difficult to get the ball off. You couldn't believe how difficult it was to get the ball off that. And he barely touched 5 foot. It was just so weird how strong he was on the ball. This man had won the World Cup, with Argentina. It was phenomenal. And you just go through the team and it was, like I say, quite surreal for me to be involved with these players. But fortunate enough to end up, getting in the team, which was great.
At Farnborough Town, who was the best trainer?
I would probably say Stevie Baker.
Why so?
He was just always super fit. I think Steve was another one who played it to a good age as well and always looked after himself. And when you think how old he was when he was up and down that line all the time, getting crosses in and all sorts. And then I think the other lad on the other side who I think he might have left in my second season, who was a fair age, no disrespect to him as well, was Keith Baker on the other side as well. Keith was phenomenally fit as well. Them two, to be fair.
And on the flip side, who was the worst trainer?
Oh, blimey. That's a tough one. I'll tell you what, he'll probably kill me for saying this if he hears this, but Andy Bye, right, he just always wanted to go up front in training. Whatever we were doing, he'll tell you this. He will tell you it, though. He's always, and we're looking around thinking, he's supposed to be at the back in training, working on stuff, and next minute he's like, yeah, just find me, Dave. Just find me up front. I'll play up front. Play off me. He was a nightmare in training, but obviously a great player on the pitch. But I'll probably say Andy, he'll probably kill me when he hears this.
Who was the last player out of the changing room after every game?
Oh, that's a good question. God, that's a long time ago now. I was probably one of them, obviously because of my age, because I was just too old to get changed quickly. There's probably a few of us like that. Me and Stevie Baker, I think. Again, yeah. God, I think Broomy was one of them as well. Yeah, me and Steve and Broomy. A lot of us would sit there just, the young ones would go off, into the bar and have their chats with their family. I mean, our families were there as well, obviously, but, we just used to try and dissect the game a little bit and try and get a little bit out in the open. I mean, obviously, I don't think it's always the best time because obviously some things can get a little bit heated. But, yes, a lot of the lads were trying to sort of put things right, really, if things were going wrong and have a chat. But I think myself, Stevie Baker, Broomy were probably the last ones out. Jamie would probably take ages because he had that big mop of curly hair, didn't he? He was one of them. But the sad thing was about that as well, for me personally, was I didn't actually want to leave the club. I'd actually signed a new contract. And not a lot of people know that. When we went down, I'd agreed to stay because they'd had loads of interest from clubs. Now, the only reason, and people probably out there might be saying, oh, he's only just saying this now. Some people might know it. The only reason they sold me was because there was some debt within the club that they had to pay off. And that is the truth. If you get hold of Alan Taylor, he may know that as well. Because I came in, if you remember, I actually signed for Dover on the Thursday before the start of the season. And that is late. They came down on the Tuesday. Ted and Alan had already spoken to me and said, Dave, we've got a few issues within the club. You don't need to know the finer details, but we may have to sell you. We've had a few offers. There was a couple of league clubs, but they wouldn't pay the 50 grand. One of them, I'm probably all right to say it now, was Southend United. I'd actually spoken to Barry Fry. I'd actually agreed terms to go back into football again, but they wouldn't pay the fee. No, they wouldn't pay the fee, believe it or not, but then Dover come along and pay it.
Your goal record was phenomenal for what would have still been in those days, and no disrespect to yourself, a nominal fee. That's incredible.
Yeah, there was Dover had put the bid in. I'd actually been down to Southend to speak to Barry Fry. Like the deal was virtually signed, sealed and delivered. It was just that they couldn't agree the fee. And Barry said the club are not willing to pay 50 grand, which is a bit bizarre actually, Ben, when they just sold Stan Cullymore for 1.7 million. And I said, well, where's that money going? He said, oh, Dave, that's going on the training ground. That's going on this and that and the other. And I said, oh, okay, I'll just leave it with you guys. I can't do anything about that. It didn't materialise. Dover stumped up the money, and obviously the rest is history. But that is actual fact for me that I'd actually signed a new deal at Farnborough the week before then. That all happened. Don't ask me what it was. There was some sort of debt or some money that was owed within the club for something that had materialised over the years or however long that we sort of knew dribs and drabs about, but not the whole thing. And, as players, you probably don't want to know. And, yeah, that was it. Next minute, we've got to sell you. And that's why I went in the end. Quite sad, really.
It is, and it's a sad end to a good time at the club.
Yeah, it was, yeah. It was great for me, personally. I know it was quite sad for everybody because we went down. Personally, for me, the accolades I got that year, getting picked for the England side as well. Like you say, the top scorer in the league, getting in the conference team of the year. And then, when I look back, when I did get sold on, it was, in hindsight, it probably worked out well for me for the career I had then on in. Who knows what may have happened had I stayed at Farnborough. It could have been totally different, as we know in football. But it worked out well from going to Dover. The Rushton spell was only brief because obviously they went full-time and I couldn't go full-time then. I was too old to do full-time and move away again. And then obviously had my most successful time as a team when I went to Kingstonian, which under Jeff Chappell. And by the way, they were the two best managers at non-league level I'd ever seen and played was Ted and Jeff Chappell. Very similar. And what they've done career-wise, haven't it? Taken the park teams up, and it's absolutely phenomenal. It's just a shame they never got a chance to go into the pro game, or maybe they didn't want to. It's two great blokes, two great managers that I always had the privilege to work with.
So finally, when you look back at your time at Farnborough Town, what are your overriding emotions? What do you remember most?
The goals, obviously. The season I had there, the second season more so. The great camaraderie we had at the club. Right to the very end as well, under Ted and Alan Taylor, like right to the end, we dug in and tried to escape that relegation battle. It wasn't to be, but, the lads were still great. But on a personal note, the great people there, I can still remember them today. And I am going to try and get up to a game, by the way, soon as well, come up. Hopefully there might be still the same fans that when I was there, I don't know. I can assure you in non-league they usually are, aren't they? Yeah. In my early spell when I left Pompey as a 19-year-old, I went to Fareham. So a little bit naive about it all. So I had 2 years there and went back in the pro game, say, for 8 or 10 years. So when I went back into it, I was a little bit apprehensive, as you can imagine. When I went in there, it was amazing, absolutely amazing. The people were amazing. There was where the game has evolved, with the Premier League and the league clubs moving on, how sort of it's a business now. The non-league was still keeping its identity as non-league, where you could mix. I miss the days where you could go in as a professional club and have a drink with the fans and mix with them, and that is sort of to go. The divide moved away a little bit, and I think it's even filtering down to the lower leagues of that now. Whereas most of the time at non-league level, you can go in the bar after the game and mix with them all. However you played, it didn't matter. It was great. It was a great atmosphere within them clubs. All the clubs I played at that non-league level were great. The people were great, and you could talk to the directors, you could talk to the chairman. It's I'd imagine at the professional level now that would be quite difficult, other than make an appointment. Like I say, I could remember back in the days in, one club in particular, Oxford, where in the 80s we walked in the bar after the game, however you played, good, bad or indifferent, and we would talk to the fans, and they respected that as well. And it was like, because back in the day, most of the money that came through the turnstile was the sponsorship money, really, wasn't it? The fans were the main sponsors of the game. But because it's moved on so much, where I think now you don't even need the supporters to survive in that level, up in the higher levels, it's changed a lot. Not for my liking, to be honest. I prefer to be a little bit grounded and have that rapport between the fans and the members of the club, be it from the top to the chairman, to no disrespect to the tea lady or whoever, or the groundsman who sweeps up, or to the ball boys, whatever. It was all brilliant camaraderie in that football. I loved it, absolutely loved it. I had 2 great careers, a professional one and a non-league one, and they were both great. But a little secret here is that I really, really enjoyed the non-league scene, really did.
David Leworthy, non-league legend, Farnborough Town goal-scoring machine. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for talking to us.
No worries, my pleasure too, Ben. Bye, mate. See you later.